Something else that you'll find yourself using often in Photoshop is layers. Photoshop is one of the earliest programs to start using layers, and it's an ingenious way to be able to organize and create all kinds of neat effects with your documents. So let's take a quick look at layers now. Later on in the course, we'll get a little more in depth in how layers work and the different things you can do with them. But I want to give you a brief overview so if you see them start popping up, you know what's going on. So over on the right hand side, we have a layers panel, and you can see that there's some options here, and then we have a layer already called background and a little lock and an eyeball. Now whenever we opened up this image, it created the layer and put the image on here, and it called it background, and it locked it so that this layer actually cannot be moved around. If I go up to the top and I click on the move tool, it says moves a selection or layer, and I click and start dragging, you can see that that will not move around at all, and that is because it has been locked down. Now when I let go, it asks, do we want to convert it to a normal layer? When we do that, we'll be able to edit it and change its blending mode and opacity and so forth, but for now we'll just cancel that out. And of course the eyeball is for visibility. If I don't want to see this layer, I can go ahead and hide it, except it is locked, so we can't hide this layer at that time. So let's see how we would add some layers. Well, the first thing you might notice is whenever we add anything like a shape or some type, a new layer is automatically created. So I'm going to go over here to the horizontal type tool with the shortcut key of T. I'm going to select it, and we'll just leave all the settings the same, except let's just make it a little larger so it's easier to see here. We'll just go to the highest setting, and we'll click, and we'll type layers. Let me grab that move tool. I'm just going to move that down a little bit. Okay? And now what you see, whenever I created that type, it added a new layer, and we have a type layer icon here, and it actually called it whatever the text was. So because I named the text layers, it called this actually layer. If I would have named it raspberry, the layer name would actually be raspberry also. However, it's not locked down, and that's why we can move it around. So when I grab that move tool, I can click and drag and move this around. And because the background layer is locked, I know that I can't accidentally click and drag that. So whenever I start dragging around, I know anything that's unlocked will move, but anything locked will not. I can also hide this layer, so I can click on that eyeball, and that layer will go away. And you'll see that these happen whenever you're creating any type of type or any type of symbols or shapes. We will have layers automatically generated for us, especially using things like the pen tool. So now that we've seen how a layer works, let's see some other things that we can do with the layers. And again, we will touch on more of this later on, but basically we can create a new layer on our own. At the bottom, we have some options for different things like image adjustment effects and overlays and masks, and we can create different groups. But over to the right, it says create a new layer with a little picture of an icon of a piece of paper or new icon. I'm going to click on that, and it adds a layer here. And this layer is showing a grid for its icon, which means it's transparent. There's no background there. And I can do whatever I want on this layer aside from something like adding text. If I go and I grab our brush tool, so let's go ahead and find the brush tool, and we'll leave the settings like before, and I'll just draw on here. That has been added to that layer because it was selected when I drew. So if I go ahead and hide this layer, that will go away, and it's unaffected by the one beneath it, which is the text. Now I can actually take this and I can drag it over to the other layer, and you can see that though they cover each other up, they're not really interacting with one another. The layer that is on top is actually the topmost layer of this document with the background in the very back. So everything is above that. If you look at this dessert here, you can see that we have, say, 3 layers. Our bottom layer, and then the cream layer in the middle, and then our top layer. And that's kind of how the layers work here. Let's go ahead and take the text, and we're going to change this color to say red. And it'll change the color of that text. Now, with the top layer being the black line that we drew, you can see it's going over the red letters because it's actually on top of the layer stack here. If we click and drag this underneath, and you can see it highlight there, and I let go, Now it's behind the text because it's beneath it here. So the same thing happens with the background image. If we were to just double click this, it's going to turn this into a new layer and we can give it a name. So we can still call it background if we want, but now it's an actual layer that can be hidden and it can be moved around. However, if I put this layer on top, it's above everything else, and so these are being hidden behind it. So we want to make sure that we understand that workflow, that whatever is on bottom of the layers panel is underneath everything in your image, and whatever is on top, like this text, is going to show up on top of the image. And that's important to know as you begin working. Now, something to also take note, if I hide that background layer, you can see that the whole screen has this checkerboard. And basically, this means that it's transparent. There is no background. It's actually not a checkerboard. It's nothing. So whenever you create any type of transparent images or GIFs or anything like that in the future, PNGs, you will need to save with this transparent background so that you don't have any background showing. And we'll talk about that also a little bit later. You also have other options with layers. You can delete the layers. So if I select layer 1 and I click on the trash can, I can delete it. It'll ask us if we're sure, and we can click yes. I can also right click on a layer and it gives me all kinds of different options. So we can duplicate the layer, we can delete it, we can export out just that layer, and all kinds of other neat options that we can talk about a little bit later on as we get into layers. And then finally, like all other panels inside of Photoshop, there are some layers options specifically for this panel so that we can create new layers straight from here, and we can create groups and artboards and other things such as flattening the image when we have a bunch of layers and want to make it a single image. So hopefully that gives you a brief understanding of how layers work. If I went too fast or it doesn't really make sense yet, don't worry. We'll talk about it later on, and we'll definitely get into using layers because there's a lot you can do with them. I just wanted to go ahead and give you a quick overview so that when you start seeing layers pop up over there and we begin using the text tool and different things, you'll understand how they work a little better.